Hello, internet friends, and welcome to Keep the Game Moving. And this time, I'm excited to welcome Morgan Nuncio to the show. Morgan is a GM who runs all sorts of Powered by the Apocalypse games. So, spoiler alert for those watching, we're going to be talking about the Apocalypse engine and many of its various iterations, of which Morgan knows far more than I do. So, Morgan, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You said, my name is Morgan Nuncio. She, her, they, them pronouns interchangeably. You can find me on the socials, as you can see at the thing below, at Serena Bezos. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. I love Apocalypse games. I love talking about them. I'm happy to be here.
Well, let's get into it. So, what got you started as a game master?
Well, let's take it back to when I actually started playing, because because I started in high school when I was like 15 or so, and I actually started LARPing at the same time too. So they kind of were right next to each other. But it was mainly just D&D and like Pathfinder and Vampire and all those other games that were in the early to mid 2000s. And eventually I played mostly that all the way until on and off until maybe 7 years ago when I started playing Powered by Apocalypse games like Apocalypse World, Monster Hearts, other small games like Microscope, and just other small games like that. And then I started GMing maybe about 3 years ago next March, and it was for D&D. That's where I originally started from. But I eventually started doing Powered by Apocalypse games in the last 2 years or so, I think. Yeah, mainly just doing one-shot streams of Monster Hearts or any other stuff. And then this past year, starting last October or so, is when I started up Powered by Players, where we did our podcast, which is all the Powered by Apocalypse games, one-shots, mini campaigns with a rotating diverse cast. So,
and that's actually how I found out about you. I think that show, the commitment to showing how diverse the gaming community is and how diverse it can be is fabulous, but also the love that it seems like everybody on there has for the Apocalypse engine games.
Yeah.
And the stories that you're telling is I think it's pervasive. It comes through the screen and makes you want to watch and makes you want to be part of these stories.
Yeah, and that's what I enjoy, because a lot of my gaming circles growing up were just very white, very cis male oriented, and there's one point, especially in LARPing in general, I was the only femme presenting person at the games and at the table for D&D. So it's I want to help push and promote being no, there's people from all types and walks of life and everything who are nerds who just want to get together and make a story. And that's I'm an advocate for majorly BIM POC, Black, Indigenous, mixed, multicultural, people of color. Be hey, we're here, we want to play. Let us make these stories from a non-cis het white male perspective.
Yeah. In the interest of full disclosure, Morgan and I are both staff members of the best gaming convention anywhere in the world, Big Bad Con.
Yes.
And one of the things that makes Big Bad Con the best gaming convention in the world is that commitment to having a diverse pool of guests, of speakers, of GMs, and of players.
Yeah.
It's the only con I go to where I can sit down at a table and be the only old white guy.
And what's great too is what I loved about last year, not this past year because the world, but last year, 2019, when we had the Babylon Equality Project, where they've had the charity to bring people of color who couldn't make it to yeah, we're gonna fundraise for you to come and stay, come to the con. And then they had the POC meet and greet where basically the con cleared out about 60 or so people. We all went to go eat dim sum together. And then
those relations, I think that meet and greet is so important because it's connecting that community and it's giving connective fiber to a community that frankly has, way too much energy has been spent by people like me trying to fragment that community.
Yeah.
And so the more that we can do to create those connective fibers and start those relationships of like, oh man, I want to talk to Cypher of Tyr. I want to do all this stuff. Like that's how change happens.
Yeah.
And Big Bad, you can't say enough good things about the work that Sean and Big Bad Con do to try and actively make that happen.
They are actively focused and they recognize these issues and they do like definitely work on it. Especially, it's not even just on people of color. Like accessibility is another thing. Like they have a full table of like accessibility dice, or like they work with accessibility coaches to like figure out like, okay, how do people with wheelchairs get around, or like what are the codes and stuff for the accessibility to, like, for example, they were going to go to a new. Wait, hold on. What was that announced? I don't know. The new hotel stuff.
Oh, we were looking at going to a new hotel.
Yeah. If you need to cut it out, just go ahead and do so.
And there were possibly some accessibility issues that really factored into the decision. But even little things like Big Bad Con pioneering in the pronoun badges. And making sure that people were being referred to. And let's bring it back to the Apocalypse engine. Big Bad Con features a meta game that Morgan, who helps run the front desk, tell us about, like, explain sort of how that works.
Okay, so I first heard about this game 2018 at Living Games Conference, which is a LARP conference that bounces around the U.S. That one was in Boston. Sean and trying to remember who else was there. Oh no, my brain's fritzing. I think it was Nathan Black. Okay. Sean and Nathan were there. I don't know. I'm sorry. But they are the ones who originally talked about it. And I was like, that sounds really cool. So eventually when I went to Big Bad Con and handled the table, it was there. So basically what it is, it's what is it called? Oh shoot. Is it the Big Bad? Is it Big Bad Con, like the con game? Like just the Big Bad World?
I think it is Big Bad World.
Yeah. So Big Bad World is basically a game that you play. It's kind of like a meta game for you, the person, to like play itself. And there's like 5 different, not 5, but there's like multiple choices you can do. You can be like, I'm gonna grab my pens real quick so I can read them off.
There's groups that are, so you get a while you do that, I'll vamp here.
Okay.
So you're gonna get a play set just like you're playing a Powered by the Apocalypse game, and Morgan's gonna go get a if this were a well planned out, well hosted show, I would have said, hey, why don't you have that? It's not, so we're moving on. But you get a little play set booklet that is whatever your kind of role at the convention is, whether it's like the nurturer and you check XP if you like say, hey, how's it going? If you check in on people, or you're the explorer and you check XP if you meet people you don't know, and that sort of thing. And it's very much like your character sheet for a Powered by the Apocalypse World game.
It's also self-care for yourself, because some of them are like, go outside for a bit, make sure you have some water. And then other ones are like, hey, make sure you're the staff person. If you want to, try to get them something to eat, or like make sure that they have something to drink. I actually have an old character sheet that was in my badge. Like this is one of the advanced booklets. It's called The Wolf. So basically it says, you might be asking about how to volunteer for the Wolf Pack. So this is like when you really start getting to like volunteer stages, and you mark XP for each thing you do. And it says whenever you clean up a room that has been left a mess, help someone who's in distress, organize a pickup game, get food for a busy staff member, thank you so much. And basic moves are not for a wolf, because of course all the other playbooks have basic moves. So, and then when you mark your 5th XP, give high fives to all the convention staff and let them know you want to join the Wolf Pack. Seriously, come back next year and help out. You rock.
And every, each of these books, like when you check XP, if you fill up your XP row, you bring it back to the reg desk, and sometimes you got a little pin, or sometimes you got just showered with adulation. But it was a fun way. See, there are the pins. Yeah, it's a fun way to kind of gamify, if that's a word, positive behavior at cons. And but it also is a great introduction to the Powered by the Apocalypse games, because that is the system that Powered by the Apocalypse World runs. Your character sheet is literally a little trifold, and you just check things off as you go through. And
It's
so,
so good.
you know, check off the 3 words that describe your character, and that, I think, that might be the most consistent. You would know far better than I. That might be the most consistent thing through all of the various iterations of the Apocalypse engine, is that folio character sheet.
Yeah, they make character creation super easy, and that's what I love about it, because you can basically just look at this character sheet and be like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Cool, I'm gonna play like the Doomed from like Mask, or like maybe I'll play the Wizard from Urban Shadows. And you're like, okay, cool. I'll look at the sheet. It tells you, it asks you for your name. You can always pick that later, because I'm bad at picking names. I'm terrible at picking names. It takes me forever. Then you have like your looks, your so basically you'll figure out like an idea of like what your character looks like. And that's just other generic stuff. And then it'll like walk you through character creation as well. It's like, okay, well, for stats, you just either pick one of these 2 rows, or you have these 3 numbers and you just stick them wherever. Or so
one of the things that I love about every iteration of the Apocalypse engine that I have played is that your relationship with the players at the table is sometimes physically and sometimes more symbolically a statistic in the game. You know, and so your relationship with the other characters takes on, I think, an importance that a lot of role-playing games build through, you know, let's play together for 6 years, and now these characters know each other.
Yeah.
The Apocalypse engine does a great job of shorthanding that right away.
Yeah, it's like, hey, you already know each other. How do you know each other in that sense? And I really like that, because like, especially for one-shots or anything like that, and you're trying to get all these new people who've never played together, like, to play together. They're like, I maybe. So this gives them like a good, especially if they're like shyer or like not confident in their playing skills. They were like, okay, we can have this connection. And you're like, okay, cool. Tell me about this. Like, let's conversate about like what it may be. And it brings up some really, I love session zeros. People are like, some people find them boring or they don't care, but I love them because I love learning about how people think and how they design their characters and what ideas they put into it. And it just makes me like, yes, please tell me. Well, give me all the conversation. Yeah.
Let's unpack that a little bit. And maybe for people who might be new GMs, let's talk about session 0 and why session 0 is so important. So,
oh my God. Yes.
So what are your sort of, you know, what are your, you know, just top of your head, what makes session 0 so important?
Not first off, you get to learn everybody's, you know, mindsets of going into the game. You get to figure out safety tools, what everybody is looking to be in the game, what they rather not have in the game, and what they just don't want to see at all, or if you want to ask them about that. So, like, for example, I always do lines and veils, and I send out a spreadsheet now that like has like our first page is lines and veils, and it's a Google Sheets. So first tab is lines and veils, and second tab is characters. So as soon as you pull it up, lines and veils are right there all the time, no matter what.
And unpack lines and veils for people who may not be familiar with all of the safety tools.
Yeah, so lines and veils is a safety tool designed to, it's one of the many that are in the toolkit, and it's designed to basically just put boundaries onto the game itself. For example, some people I don't like snakes, so my line is no snakes, and that means we don't cross that line. We don't ever see it. That's nothing. They don't exist in this world. Or they exist, but they don't exist here.
Right, they don't come up, and they're not going to come up in our game.
Yeah. And then veils are like, yeah, these things can exist in the world, but I don't want to see them. So you can reference them, or if they do happen to appear, just kind of like,
or if I'm not in the scene, you know, they can that sort of thing. Yeah.
Like if there's clowns in the road, cool. We can like hear the music off in the distance, but like I don't want to deal with any of that. Like, so it's good to know that, because
clowns are right out.
So you haven't listened to, I guess, Losers, a Love Story. They're
clowns make an appearance. I mean,
they're actually playing the. I don't know if you know it or not, but they're playing the actual like It and 1 and 2 movies. Right, okay. And they're actually like playing it out. So yeah, there's a lot of clowns in that. And a lot of other horror stuff. So just warnings all around.
I mean, I agree with you that session 0 is super important. And you know, if you're running a campaign, you need to have a session 0, and it's
Definitely.
not just character creation.
Oh, definitely not.
It's also I call it table building, because everybody thinks about world building, but table building is super important. And one thing you mentioned that I really want to unpack is asking players what kind of game they want and what they're looking for, because it's super frustrating for both a GM and players if I want to run an Edwardian romance game and you want to play, guns blazing, combat. Those two things are going to make nobody happy at the table. And so session 0 is a chance for me to say, okay, where can Edwardian romance meet your 5-foot step combat? And how do we kind of both get what we want and both make an awesome game?
And that's what I like about Powered by Apocalypse games, or hacks, or however however they're called. It's because like they have specified themes, so like it's on the tin, like this is what you're gonna get. And some games are a little more on the nose, a little more like rounded out. Like for example, there's some games that are just like a space opera. So you're like, okay, what do you mean by space opera? Is it like Firefly or is it Star Wars? Like, which one is it?
Yeah, or Star Trek.
Or Star Trek, yeah, that's right.
Different than all of them. And that, so we've sort of danced around it. So let's talk specifically about the Apocalypse World engine. So Apocalypse World, and I'm gonna try and give some of the history that I know, and please correct me and fill in, because you are someone who knows this far more than I do. But I believe Apocalypse World was the original Powered by the Apocalypse engine.
Yeah, that's what I believe. It's Megway Baker, and I have the website up right now.
I have it on my shelf back here. I can
hold on. Okay, let me just look at the Wikipedia real quick. Yeah, it's by Defensive Baker and Megway Baker. Yeah. So
and it was a post-apocalyptic sort of generic role-playing, I shouldn't say generic, that's a pejorative, but it was a post-apocalyptic role-playing game where you would play very, and the characters are very specifically archetypes. So you get and this I think also is kind of a through line through all of the Apocalypse engine games. I believe I should use the language they like. They like to call it Powered by the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
That is their preferred term. So in I think every Powered by the Apocalypse game I've played, the characters are archetypes, and that's another way to sort of get you right into the game.
Yeah, because you can like get an idea of like what you want to play. Like I want to play someone who's a fighter-ish character, or like I want to play someone who's like more socially adept. Like so you're like, okay, cool, I can look at those playbooks, which is what they call each archetype, or however playbooks, and be like, all right, cool, which one fits what I want to play.
And it's I sort of jokingly call the Powered by the Apocalypse GURPS done right, because it literally is that, GURPS had this great idea of you can play this in any genre, this is universal, but Powered by the Apocalypse games are literally universal. There's superhero games, there's Old West games, there are swords, fantasy games, there are space.
There's a Jurassic Park game, like
a Jurassic Park game, and there's 2 games where you play movie monsters. One where you play movie monsters in high school, and one where it's like movie monsters, kind of an X-Files sort of monster of the, and both are totally different, and every one has similarities where you can see the connective fiber, but each one takes the idea and really makes it its own, and it's really kind of I love the system. I think it's great. I think so. We talked a little bit beforehand. I'll just tell the story again of my first experience. I was at a Dundracon, a local gaming convention. I come in the room and it's me and 4 old white guys, because it's Dundracon, not Big Bad Con. It would have been different if it had been there. And the guy who's running the game passes out these character sheets, and we start playing. And as I'm starting to play, I'm like, this is the ultimate gateway role-playing game, because you get right to it. Like you're playing as you're creating your character. Like there's no take 30 minutes to write your character down. You're going boom. We're having a great time. And then something happens and the GM says, okay, let's talk about sex moves. And like in my head, there's a record scratch as I look around this table of me and 4 old white guys, and I'm like, sex moves?
He should at least told you that before the game started. Just he should have given you all a heads up.
Well, again, it was DunderCon, but so walk us through kind of the genesis of these why sex moves make or why sex moves are good for the game.
Okay,
I'll sort of make a slight counterpoint there in my diluted opinion, and sort of what you think they bring to the game.
So it depends on the game itself, because I know for a fact it's really Apocalypse World, Monster Hearts, and I think those are the only ones that have sex moves in it.
Yeah.
As I don't know if Crossroads Carnival does. I don't think it does, but it may. I ran that recently and I don't remember, but so, but I think because what I remember from Apocalypse World, because it's been a hot minute since I played, is it's based off of queer romances. And like, yes, you're building your character together. However, you're building this coven and starting a thing new. There's also gonna be like all these like random romances that will happen, and I think that's where the sex moves come from. And then Monster Hearts has carried it onto itself, because Monster Hearts is basically a messy life of teenagers and the allegories of them being actual monsters. So like you have your big strong dude who's like has like anger issues, and that's the werewolf. Or like you have this. Yeah, so
teenagers are nodding at home right now as they.
Yeah, they'll understand. Like, and like when I like read the playbooks, I'm like, oh, I was kind of like the unicorn, like in high school. I was kind of hopeless and like sort of like there, like because there's a lot of skins, and you'll find your own through that. But they call their playbook skins, by the way. So that's why. Sorry, I changed the lingo on you on that. But for Monster Hearts, it's because you're going through these changes, your hormonal changes, these teenage changes. They even have a move called Turn Someone On, because like you're in high school, your hormones are all over the place. Like, you know, you can get easily turned on no matter what. Like that's set in the game, because that's what the game is about.
Yeah. I think the real plus of those moves is the fact that as we sort of talked about, when you play any of the Powered by Apocalypse World games, your relationship with the other players is literally or figuratively like a statistic in the game. Mm-hmm. It's something that you're always thinking about.
Yeah.
And it's something that is always, you know, it really does a good job of that kind of push and pull of any sort of relationship. And so the sex moves definitely play into that. And, you know, my one slight pushback on them again would be, in my specific situation, it was very uncomfortable. And, you know, as I was playing the game, I was so set for this to be like, this is my gateway game. This is my, like, you've never played a role-playing game? Well, buckle up. You know, this is going to be 3 hours and everything's going to happen. But they're sex moves, just so you know. Like,
I think that's a fault on the GM side, because he should have explained like, hey, there is sex moves on the 10. However, if you and had that conversation with them, because I think GM should have conversations about that. Because the GM is also a player at the table. That's how I see it. So they also have a word like, hey, this is what I want to play. This is what I want to run. Or this is what I want to, this is not what I'm into. So for example, I'm actually playing a Monster Hearts game now. I like I mentioned before, but we don't really have sex moves, because my GM has mentioned this great thing where if you have a sex move, it kind of gives like sex power in that way. And you don't want to have that forceful power to be there. So we changed it to intimacy moves. So if you're ever like our trust moves, so like if you're ever having like an open intimate moment with somebody, you're like, hey, do you want to use your trust move, which is technically your sex move. So that's how we do ours.
Do you find, and this could be a demographic issue,
like,
you know, I am a dorky old white guy, and now for someone who's younger and hipper and more diverse, do you think that maybe the you know, having these games come out of queer romances and that sort of thing, maybe the sex moves actually might help draw them into the table? Or, I mean, I know the relationship does. The relationship stuff definitely does, because, you know, that's how you get LARPers to play RPGs.
Yeah, of course.
You know, talking about relationships and that sort of thing. You know, I
love character connections by that standards, but I don't. like maybe it's like it's not really the draw. Maybe it's just like oh, okay, cool, they have sex moves, because some people who are still like like how Monster Hunter is, you aren't sure who you are or like anything like that because you're going through these changes. Having these sex moves may like push that for some people, but also I also don't think that it could be just something that's there. But I had another thought and it went out the window. But like other games, like Urban Shadows has debts and like intimacy moves. So like you have debts on people, but you have intimate moments. So it's not really like a sex move, which I think these older games are, but it's more intimacy and more openness, and that having that honesty between people is great. But I remember now. I think with the older generations of gamers who finally go into like these like Power Bay Apocalypse games or any other the indie designs, they're just not used to having social conversations about sex or romance or anything like that. They're just hack and slash, dungeon crawls.
Right.
My crunchiness of my wizard is like so and so. They're not used to having like relationships within games that are that significant. And I think that maybe what could be as stopping as well, because they aren't used to that. They aren't used to that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I also just think it was a fault of your GM that he did not tell you in the first place.
Well, but I think, on this podcast, that's one of the reasons for this podcast is if you're going to GM a Powered by the Apocalypse game, make sure your players know, based on the skin that you're, based on the type of game you're running, that's again a conversation with the players and definitely. The GM. And some agreements. Yeah,
I actually have a slight example. Like I said, I just ran Crossroads Carnival. I don't know if you heard of it or not, but it's a Great Depression traveling circus sort of game. Kind of
creepy clowns.
Not really creepy clowns, but more like strongmen and contortionists. Yeah, like carnies. Yeah. So so the game itself actually states on the tin that it does dive into like the ostracization and the racism and all that stuff, and like the freak show-esque of the show. So I read that and I was like, ugh, I don't know how I feel about that. So I actually sat down with my crew once we were at session 0 and I was like, what do y'all think about like, how do town people treat you? Like, how far do you want the levels to go? Because I am okay with what y'all set, but I know there needs to be like, it can't be like straight up like lynching, like, or like anything like that. Because that has happened with carnies, and like some shows have like Carnival have like represented that media, because they're like, let's go with ostracization. I was like, cool. Ostracization being like, hey, get on my get on my diner. Yeah.
Now when you're running a show on stream, and here I'm going to show some ignorance. Do you run session 0 on stream?
So if it's just a one-shot stream, I typically don't have the time to do so, just because time constraints and all that. I'll run a session, like try to run it like either I'll try to like have like, hey, give me your lines and bells like in the chat or Discord, whatever we're using, just so we can have it all listed in like one area. And then like for example, for connections, so we can, because like Power Apocalypse games still have connections. I'm like, I'll try to hop on before we actually start streaming, be like, hey, can we do our connections real quick? Just 5 to 10 minutes. Let's do connections before we actually get into the gameplay, because streams are like 2 to 4 hours, and you want to have that to like show the game. But unfortunately, like when it just sometimes doesn't fit, and so you're like, but you still have to squeeze it in no matter what. You have to have your session 0. You at least have the safety tool talk, and if there's connections between players or characters, rather, have that as well.
We actually, so I run Cthulhu on stream, and we just did a 2-part session 0.
Yeah.
Each one about an hour. One was just character creation, because we did a whole like, here's how you make a character in Call of Cthulhu. And then the second part was the session 0. Let's talk about our lines and veils. Let's talk about our safety tools. Let's talk about how our characters connect. That sort of thing.
Yeah, if it's a campaign, I definitely stream it. I definitely would.
I think people were, people were interested, and also, so one of the things that I ask my players is like, what are kind of images or things that evoke something for you for this game? And the chat started throwing them in as well.
Oh my God, yes, I love that. Yeah. So one thing I ask for my podcast people, I always have to throw like one question in regards to like what we're playing. I like, for example, for Mask, I was like, what's your favorite superhero? Like who, like, so I can just get an idea of like what they know from like superhero genre.
Mhm.
Like some people say Thor, some people say Wonder Woman. I'm like, all right, cool. So like one person's like Thor, I was like, all right, cool. So maybe you're gonna like do a little Thor thing. Who knows? But like it's good to know that like what you know.
Yeah.
For Monster of the Week, I did what did I do? Monster of the Week, I did your favorite Supernatural like Monster of the Week shows. So like Supernatural, Buffy, X-Files, Fringe, like those sort of shows.
Mhm.
And so I can like I know where their brains are at. So
Yeah, I think that's a great, that can also be a great shorthand to kind of create a theme. If people, if people have that kind of evocative feel of, okay, X-Files, there's going to be lens flare everywhere, and
yeah.
like we're going to be using ridiculous flashlights and stuff. That can definitely help. So how do you like, why do you run why do you run Powered by the Apocalypse games? Why do you find that they do you choose sort of the one to tell the story you want, or do you pick the game and then kind of come to the story?
I honestly picked the games first. So it's not just me. I'm one of the three co-hosts. It's me, Kristen Devine, and Diana Lorraine. We work together as a team because Diana is sort of like our player angler. Kristen is our editor, bless her, because I don't know how to edit a podcast and she's learning. So
That's awesome, man. What's it like to have an editor?
I don't know, but I mean it's great because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Here you go, Kristen. And she's like, all right, cool. I got it. So having them, we bounce off ideas like what we want to play next. And I actually have them like mainly choose the games because I'm like, I choose a genre, y'all just pick the game from the list. Like, for example, we were doing like, I was like, I want to, after Monster of the Week, I was like, let's do a fun, like, just quirky sort of one shot. And so they chose Escape from Dino Island, which will be out soon. Or by the time this podcast comes out, we'll be out by then. But basically, yeah, so they're like, okay, Escape from Dino Island. I was like, cool. Who do we want to have for our cast? And then from there, we'll actually, once we figure out who's on the cast, we'll start at session 0, and then from there, build the story. So we pick the game first, and then go to the story. So, like, there's sometimes, like, I want to play a sci-fi game. Like, okay, cool. What sci-fi game do you want to play? I want to play, like, a superhero genre game. Like, all right, cool. Which, there's a lot in all the genres. And actually, on my spreadsheet, I actually have a list of, like, names, genre types, and if they have a website, I'll like throw in the website as well, just so we can like easily grab it.
That's actually one cool thing about the Powered by the Apocalypse games is that usually you get the book and the book is awesome, but then you can go on the website and they'll just have tons of new character classes and things like that on the website that you can download.
Definitely. Or just have like just the stuff that you need to give people in general. Like, for example, if you're running a game like online, you can't give someone your book. And who has scanners nowadays? You're not going to sit there and scan a book. I'm a millennial. We do not have printers in our house. Actually, no, my roommate has a printer I like, but I don't use it. But anyway, like, so it's nice to have that PDF online so you can just, and it's for free for the most part. They're all free. Like mainly it's just like the play sheets and the basic moves. And you're able to just share that with your players. And you're like, this isn't really what you need. You just, but if you want to get the book and read more, you can. But like, to actually start playing, you just need this.
Barrier to entry. Like you could start running a Powered by the Apocalypse game tonight. You could download the stuff and share it with your players, and you could literally make your characters and start playing in that same session.
Yeah,
it's one of the cool things about it is this is sometimes playing RPGs can be kind of an expensive hobby. If you want to buy the latest book and all that stuff. This is a free resource to run great games. And
I mean, you may need to buy like the book or something, or like, for example, if you're doing Escape from Dino Island, I think the PDF's like what, $15?
Right. There are, if you want to layer on more levels and do, cooler stuff. Yeah. But if you want to like just get your game up and running, you can pretty much do it with stuff you find on the websites of the games, which is I think a wonderful thing. And it's I mean, that's an accessibility issue as well, of being able to
And not just mention, just not even like big things like drive through, like itch.io has been like fantastic lately, especially with indie designers, just because like they do like some jams together, so you'll find games from jams, and then you'll like springboard from like that game you find and like see that they design other games, look at that game, and then see like other people like attached to like who did similar games like that. And you're just like, oh no, I'm deep diving here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the impressive things is the level of kind of of independent creator content for the Apocalypse, powered by the Apocalypse game. There's just tons of it, and there are, that's a Google deep dive that can keep you going for a while. I mean, you were saying you have a spreadsheet of just like every powered by the Apocalypse game you can think of. So what's the count right now?
So let's see here. I would say about 71 or 2.
Man.
And that's just the ones that are actually considered PBTA. So like I have maybe like 8 to 10 more that are like PBTA-esque. So they'll like take like the essence of PBTA, but like it's not really like sort of thing. Like they're like, yeah, we use the playbooks, but like we don't use the same dice system or something like that.
So
like,
what do you think is the most popular genre?
Oh, just right now in general, off the top of my head, I would say Monster of the Week for sure. So very supernatural, like sort of like aspect to it, like because you have a Horror Borealis that's a Monster of the Week show. You have various other shows that are Monster of the Week shows. We ran a Monster of the Week show, so like
I don't think you talked a little bit about Monster Hearts, and I kind of want to dive in a little more there, because I think Monster Hearts is one of the more interesting ideas there. As Morgan said, the idea is that you're all high school kids who are essentially embodying the classic movie monsters, and in the one sense it's allegorical, but in the other sense it's quite literal, that you are the Frankenstein monster.
You're literally a werewolf, like
and it manages to connect kind of that awkward, uncomfortable high school experience with this otherworldly aspect that kind of adds a whole nother layer.
It does, and it's fantastic because like, so I don't know if you ever played Monster Hearts, have you? Oh, you have? Okay, so Session 0, and then you also have your homeroom design. That's the last bit, is where you sit down, you're like, okay, cool, our characters are made, we have to make our homeroom class, which I don't know, I don't think high schools have those anymore, but like we'll still go with it, whatever.
Right.
So you actually sit together and you're like, okay, cool, where do you sit in the lineup? And you like they tell you like where they sit, like either by the door because they want to be the first one out, or in the back because they're like a mischievous little shit. Like, oh, I don't know if I can cuss on the screen.
Go to town.
Okay, sorry.
We've been talking about sex moves for 20 minutes.
I just wanted to make sure. Or like, oh, they're studious, so they're right front and center, or they got in trouble, so they're right front and center, so the teacher can keep an eye on them. And then you're like, okay, cool. Who sits to your left of you? So you start building out the school just a little bit more, because your world should be the school first, and then the rest of the town later. Because
it creates NPCs that then it kind of organically brings up the law of conservation of NPCs, where why make a new NPC when you've got Jeannie the cheerleader that can show up, and we all know her.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh yeah, that's Chad. He's like the school stoner, like or like. And then you can also start bringing in like drama into it as well. And you're like, oh, that's Janelle. She's the smartest kid in the class, but why has she been missing for the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, you can, and I mean, instant adventure hook, and these are created. So one thing that we haven't really talked about is GMing Apocalypse, powered by the Apocalypse games, can be a very different experience than GMing, you're not picking up like G1 against the Giants and kind of seeing what's in room 7. Yeah. This is very much a story game.
It's a story game. It's very narrative. It's also very like, I play it very improvisationally, just because that's the kind of person I am. Just because you don't know where they're going to go, so you're like, you can have beats of like what you want to happen, but you don't have like, oh, they're going to go in this dungeon, and like I'm going to have this room and this room and this room and this room like set up, and there's this trap that they have to get through, and like just like, hey, you're high school, what are you doing?
Right, yeah. I mean, and you can do both with
Yeah.
this system. You know, I think honestly you're going to have a little more. I don't want to say success. I think you're going to find it a little easier to be more improvisational. I think this game, it does want a GM that can sort of go on their, take what the players give them on their on as they're going. You know, because players are throwing out so much stuff that you're just like, okay, that needs to come back. You know, and really, if you're running this game, just write down everything the players say and bring it back. You know, and you've got your game
break
right
their
there.
hearts. Like,
Yeah. You, I actually, so this is not powered by the Apocalypse game, but I always think, especially with Monster Hearts, I think of an old Jason Morningstar game, the Shavalhiri Roach.
I don't think I played that one, but I love Jason.
It's fantastic. So the Shavalhiri Roach is the darkest, most aberrant game I've ever played. Like every time I've played it, horrible things have happened to everyone that plays. The idea is that your professors at a 1920s college all trying to get tenure. But the problem is somebody brought back an ancient Mesopotamian god in the body of a cockroach. And this roach keeps taking people over.
Oh, no.
And when the roach takes you over, it gives you these nonsensical commands that you can't understand because you don't speak ancient Babylonian.
Yeah.
And so it'll, you know, drive my enemies before me. And you're like, what does that mean? I don't know what. But the reason that I bring this up is that every game of the Roach has the same NPCs and they're listed on your character sheet. Mm-hmm. And the only stat they have is method of death because the game says NPCs are kindling, burn them all. And I take that same mindset with less death to Monster Hearts. Yeah. You know, the NPCs that the players give you are the fuel that will drive the story that you want to tell.
Yeah, and what's great about Monster Hearts too, they give you like, and a lot of these games too give you tenets, so they give you like beats of what to play with. Like, for example, for Monster Hearts, it's like speak what honesty demands. So like if you're like unsure about something, you just like, hey, speak what honesty demands. What are you thinking about right now? And that's what you go with. Be feral. Of course, you're playing high school kids, but they're still like animalistic and they can't control it. At least some of them are animalistic, like the werewolf or like, you know, the shifter or anything like that. So like be feral, be wild, be, you know, just enjoy this nature that your character has. And there's two others that escape me right now. But, you know, you list these tenets, you think about them, and you're like, yes, this is kind of like the beats that you want to hit and like push the story. So like you're stuck or in a rut. You're like, I think one of them's like separate them. Like keep them close, but also separate them at the same time. Like, I don't know, like something like that. But
I mean, I actually played a game of Monster Hearts at a con where the GM just had those on index cards on the table.
Yeah.
And, you know, if it reached a point where people were like, he'd just be like, well, pick one.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And that's great for like con games or like people who are new to PBTA. They're like, I don't really know exactly how to play it. And we talked about PBTA in the narrative sense, but we haven't actually talked about mechanics either. So like,
let's dive in.
Right. So mechanics are like super simple.
I think I have everything I need to play right here. Here's 2d6.
Yeah, 2d6, pretty much perfect. That's all you need. And what's great about it too is that you'll have the 2d6 and you'll have some stats maybe to add to it. And that's it. If you fail, it's usually a 6 under, but for all the games, for most of the games rather, each time you fail forward. So that means you get experience. So like even though you're failing at doing that particular thing, like trying to read it, gaze into the darkness and like get like some sort of information, you might fail at that, but your character still grows. And I think that's beautiful. And I love that about the game.
Yeah, it is the ultimate yes and no but game.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And 7 and 9 is like mixed successes, meaning that like, yeah, you get that, but there's either complication or it's hazy or like something happens. And then like a 10 plus is like, yeah, you did it. You did it really well. How did you do it? Like, tell me. And what I love bouncing off those mechanics as well, and this is what something I do, I actually ask my players, for example, if they're gazing into the abyss or like trying to do something like, I was like, how does this look? Like if we're watching this as a show, tell me what you're doing. Like how would the viewer see you right now? Like,
yeah, it lends itself, like the system itself, but also just the various iterations lend themselves to a cinematic style of gameplay. Mm-hmm. It's surprising to me how many GMs I've played with who have independently come to this sort of like, all the camera is a character in the game. And there's a lot of like camera movement, and the camera sees here and we pan back and that sort of thing.
And I love that, just because you get like these beats and like this feel and this tone of the show. Like typically, like whenever I start a show, I try to do like a big like, like when you see like in movies and they're trying to set up the movie, they like do like various like wide angle shots of like the city they're in, or like the neighborhood, or like various stuff. I try to set it the same way. So like for Monster of the Week, I sort of gave like a little hint to like what the drama was, because various like supernatural shows that like have like before the title screen, they'll like show a little bit of like what's going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to do that. Like I
I love that idea. I think having a kind of image setting, and even asking the players like, what's the first thing you see, or something like that. That can really set a tone and kind of set the theme of the game even stronger. You talked about the experience mechanic, and I want to talk about that a little bit. So experience is literally a little check mark on your character sheet there, and when you get a certain number of experience, it's different, I think, in each.
It's average 5 or so.
Yeah.
So
then you get to add an ability to your character,
or boost a stats.
Right. You get to and you have, and again, those are check boxes. So it's just, you can see everything on your character sheet as you're doing it. And so failure is mechanically interesting in the game, because you want to fail, because that is how you get 90% of your experience.
Yeah, it's fantastic. The only one who doesn't really have it is Urban Shadows, from what I can tell so far. Just because Urban Shadows, you get experience from like something with the factions. Like you have to do like actions with all 4 factions. It's Urban Shadows is a fantastic game. It's just a lot more intricate than like your typical PBTA game.
Right. And I to me, that's one of the selling points of Powered by the Apocalypse, is that it's almost literally pick up and go.
Yeah.
You can get a good Powered by the Apocalypse game going at the table.
Mm-hmm.
You can get a great game going with some time and with a session 0 and that sort of thing. But, at a con,
it's perfect to have a con.
When we can have cons again, it's a great game to do that for. So you have run so many of these, and you've GM'd tons of different ones. So what's your favorite Powered by the Apocalypse game?
I know we talked a lot about it, but it's Monster Hearts.
Yeah, I think that's clear. I mean, you can do it.
I mean, it's like the only one that I actually have merch up too. Like I actually have the Deer Coin t-shirt. Like
all right, so but let's unpack that. So is it because the theme resonates with you? Is it because of particular mechanics? What is it that makes it your favorite?
You know what? I always think about this, and I don't know why. I think it's the themes. I also think it's just like high school and like having that chance to like redo it in a way, just because my high school wasn't that great. Because we all know how
alone in that.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people resonate with it too, because like high school wasn't that great for them, so maybe they'll do like a take 2 and a different try, like a fantastical sense to it. And I don't know, I just like the drama of it. Like a lot of my games that I run don't really have the sex moves or anything like that, so sex is just, it's there if it happens, but typically it doesn't. I usually focus on like the drama or the supernatural sort of aspects to it, and the high school drama with the supernatural is just like, I don't know, it's just fantastic, and I love it.
And that is actually why that, and the fact that I love superheroes, is why Masks is my favorite Powered by the Apocalypse. I think it's such a neat system, and I love the way that your statistics change based on how actions with other characters.
Yeah, like they influence who you are. So like, and it's just, I think it's perfect in that sort of sense that like, because you're teenagers, you're very like, you're worried about your self-image. So like, if your peers think you're like being a little too bold or brazen, that's going to change your stats to be as such. And I think that's just finessed really, really well.
Yeah, it adds a layer to the system of, and I think a lot of the Powered by the Apocalypse games do this, but it mechanically, how you're role playing impacts other players. And I think that's a really interesting, because normally, in other games, there's kind of silos. there's role playing, and
Yeah.
there's mechanics,
Yeah.
and the mechanics tends to be combat.
Yeah.
And the role playing tends to be, okay, now let's have a scene, where it's an interlude. And
Yeah.
Apocalypse World, really, most of the Powered by the Apocalypse really blend those. And the mechanics are tied into the relationship and the role playing. And, if you want to, get those big bonuses, you need to like kind of game that system.
Yeah. And
So
it's
for the stat heads, or for the crunchy gamers, there's that kind of hook to the game as well, which
it's
is
not as
rare.
intense as like, your old school games or your OSRs or anything like that, but I think it's just enough that you have something to work with.
Yeah, it's a hook for power gamers as well as story gamers, and it's one of the reasons that I think it's such a great game. So, all right, you've played many of these, you love them. What are some of your like? I have run maybe one or two of these games.
Mm-hmm.
What are your tips for me to run a great Powered by the Apocalypse game? Setting let's go setting neutral. Just
Okay.
if I'm going to run a Powered by the Apocalypse game, what are some things I should do?
First and foremost, get the safety tools, lines and bells, just so everybody's on the same page of what they don't want, and even have lines, like even have a little area like of what they want. Like for example, like, do you want to have a festival, or like, do you want to have romance? Like just hearing, not just hearing the negatives of like people don't want, but also hearing the positives of what people want is also amazing. Like
I think that's so important. I mean,
yeah.
I actually in con games, but also in campaign games, I'll say like, hey, is there anything that needs to happen in this game?
Yeah.
And if somebody says we need a car chase, there's gonna be a car chase.
Yeah, I know a lot of people use stars and wishes at the end of like each session. Like, what was like a star or a main highlight of the game that we just played? What do you really like about it? And then a wish is like, what would you like to happen next time? Like, oh, I would love to play with this character because I haven't played with him yet. Or like,
I've
yeah,
never heard of those, and I
really,
already love them. I'm
yeah,
gonna use that. So I'm gonna use that in my stream game because I think that's genius.
yeah, it's fantastic.
Stars
It's
and wishes.
stars and wishes, yeah. So stars are like the highlight systems. Like, oh, I loved it. Like how you two argued and that just emotional like intensity that you have. Or stars are like, I loved how like creepy. Like sometimes, and even as a GM, you have stars and wishes as well. You're like, oh, I love this part about this game, and like these two players like talking about it, and then like wishes. You can have your own wishes as well. But that's something that I use. A lot of people use. I tend to use it sometimes at the end of each session as well, just to be like, hey. Especially if it's
So
yeah.
you've already given me a new tip. This is I think that's fantastic. That is stars and wishes are like everything I want from a game. Like
Yeah.
because to your point, sometimes safety tools and that sort of thing can feel to a player like oh god, we're hammering the negative. Like
Mhm.
all I'm doing is telling you what I don't want. And that stars and wishes thing turns that on its head and says, tell me what you want.
Yeah. And even when at session 0, for example, because we're doing lines and bells, then stars and wishes towards the end, so you won't really get a lot of that positivity till the end. I also like adding lines, bells, and wants, just so you have your lines, you have your bells, and then you have what do you want from this game, or what would you
Yeah.
like to have from this game,
Yeah.
so that you can also have the positivity at the beginning as well. So
I think that's great. That's great. So, what are some mechanical tips for Powered by the Apocalypse games?
GMs don't have to roll anything, which is nice.
Beautiful. That's a reason to run the game by itself. Just by itself.
I mean, I have so one of my co-players for Valentine's Day last year actually gave me a 2d6 for it. I was like, I'm never going to use these, and then I play random PBTA games, and I just use it for those. So I have these these dice that are for our podcast, but I'll never roll them for the podcast. Okay, sure.
Put them in case of emergency.
I do use them though. I use them a lot for other various games I play in, but yeah, GMs don't have to just go with the flow. Like honestly, like but I also like implementing breaks. So like for example, if there's something that happens and like the GM's not ready, just like, hey, let's take a 5-minute break. So like we can all get a drink of water, and then you have that time to actually like breathe and like, okay, what do I need to do for the next step?
So do you do that in your podcast? Do you take a break in your podcast?
Yeah. We record like maybe like 2 episodes per recording, so we'll take breaks and stuff just because it's 3 hours.
Yeah.
We need a break.
Yeah, no. So we do a break in my stream game, and I have started to get a bad habit of like thinking in my head about a cliffhanger to schedule for because I know the break is coming.
Uh-huh.
And so in my head, I'll be like, all right, where could I break that? Where would be a good point to break this to like, because you want to talk about an endorphin hit. When you say, let's take a break and the players go, no!
Yeah.
It's
great. Especially I try to do my cliffhangers at the end of the episodes or like our end of our recording sessions rather, because it is a podcast and we just record like 2 episodes at a time.
Right.
So I'm like, yeah, and this happened. And they're like, excuse me. I was like, all right, cool. And I'm like, all right, future Kristen. That's where we're cutting the audio right there. And they're like, Morgan.
Don't pull back the curtain.
Yeah, I'm like, nope. Y'all have to figure out next time you play, like, what's going on. So,
what is something that a Powered by the Apocalypse GM could be doing right now to make their game better?
Narrative control, like the using the use of like videography, like the camera pans and the descriptions. Also asking your players to help you describe a place too, like for example, for world building or like just table setting. I'm like, okay, cool. What does this town have? Like, where is it? Where are we playing? Help me. I want y'all to throw in these ideas because I don't want to be all from me. I want everybody to have a voice at the table. So,
yeah, I think that can make such a difference, and it gives the players buy-in when things that they create come back later on and are important. And it makes them feel like a part of things.
Yeah, like for a Monster Arts game I ran for Roll to Play Network as a one-shot for them. For the Roll to Play channel on the Roll to Play Network. What did we do? I think we made a small town in Colorado, and it was just like,
why is it always Colorado?
I don't know.
What is it about Colorado that is like
the mountains? It's
like
that
horror game. It's probably happening somewhere in Colorado.
I mean, you got the woods, you got the mountains, you got like the seclusion of like being like away from the city. But like 3 out of the 4 characters all play like undead type of characters. So I was like, there's a big old cemetery in the thing. That's what I added.
There's something going on in this town.
There's like a big old cemetery, and like they had like a broke down drive-through, like a drive-in movie theater, and like so they set these settings. So we're like, okay, I can use these places as scenes as well. So it's known like, hey, this is a place where you can have a scene if you want to. So
I think that's great. Connecting it to the players and helping them sort of build the world and be a part of it makes such a difference. So what is a system that you haven't run that you would love to GM? Okay, let's do non-Powered by the Apocalypse first, and then a Powered by the Apocalypse.
Okay, so game I haven't run but like to. I haven't ran Dread. I played Dread finally.
So good.
After like 3 years of me let me play Dread, I finally got to play Dread. So I definitely want to run it.
Dread is so for people who don't know.
Oh yes, go ahead.
Walk us through Dread real quick.
Oh, Dread is a not Jenga, but like block tower mechanic game. So basically you'll pull from, I'm just gonna call it Jenga. That's what we know it is. It's like Kleenex of the world.
Jenga.
So basically it's a horror game based off of Jenga. So basically you have your characters go through a scene. So each time they do something like scary or like something that's a little more daring, you have to pull from the Jenga tower. And there's various other mechanics, but what it is, once the Jenga tower falls, your character dies. And it can get intense.
Somebody's dying.
Huh?
Somebody's dying. It might not be your character.
Yeah.
Or something awful's happening.
Yes. You can also be the hero and push the tower over. But what I played in, it was like a 1920s animation studio where the animation studio came to life, like the little cartoon characters, like the Steamboat Mickey sort of like characters.
That's awesome.
It was really, really good.
Dread is so I run almost all horror games.
Okay.
And I run Cthulhu most of the time, and I can be the most loquacious person in the world, and I'm not going to scare you. Yeah. Because we know it's a game. I'm staring at a piece of paper. Dread gets rid of that. Dread scares you. Dread is the game you play, and everyone is like not touching the table, not breathing, because that tower is gonna fall, and they're terrified. It is Dread is an experience not like any other. I don't think you can play it as anything other than a one shot.
Yeah, I think it's more of a one shot.
It's a con game. It's what it. Yeah.
It's a one shot con game, various thing. What we did is our, because we're all virtual, so our GM had a camera on the tower at their house, and their partner was playing with them too. So the partner was in another room. So when it got down to like, there's one point where there's two bars just on top of each other, just balancing like halfway up. So it was ready to go. At that point, the partner run in and is like, "No, I'm gonna pull. Get out of here. Don't touch it."
So the GM was pulling everything? Oh, yeah. Man.
And we're watching it, and we're just like, yeah, like, oh no.
Oh, that is Dread. Dread is fun. Dread is, I think it's a hard game to GM. Because you have to be prepared for things to you sort of can't control the burn of the story, because it could just all go to crap early.
Yeah.
Or, I played a game where this tower fell once the entire time we played. Yeah. And so there was this really cool kind of, everything was but there was no release of the tension. And so the tension just kept getting higher and higher and higher.
That's what happened with ours, is that we got to, I think, like the final arc, and the tower still hasn't fallen. Yeah. So like, it was like in that final arc, it did fall. So we're like, but the whole time we're like,
yeah. And so as a GM, it's a really interesting exercise, because we kind of inherently control that arc, or we go, okay, I think we're at this point now. But with Dread, you can't do that.
You can have beats and ideas, but that's about it. Like,
yeah, you can like try and push it, but you can't really. So that's a really interesting part about it. I think Dread is fantastic.
Yeah, I do too. So also, I just played 10 Candles recently on top, like with that, and 10 Candles is another like tense one.
I've not played that. Tell me about it.
Okay, so 10 Candles basically, you would play it at home and like have like 10 candles lit around you, and each time you get to like a scary part, you'll like blow a candle out.
Oh, 10 Candles. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I thought you said Tin Can, and I'm like,
oh, no.
I was imagining like, old.
Tell me your secrets.
10 Candles is really cool.
Yeah, it's a fantastic concept, and I heard so much about it before, and I was like, I'll play that eventually. Like, it wasn't one that was grabbing me, and then I had the chance to play it, and I was like, oh, like I just got so energized by the stress.
Yeah, that's funny. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So what's a powered by the apocalypse game that you haven't run that you'd like to run?
That's good.
She's looking at the spreadsheet, I can tell.
I am. Hold on. Let me see here. So one I definitely want to run, but it's not out yet, is Nahual. It is a Mexican urban fantasy.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so basically it takes off of Mexican, like Aztecian sort of like creatures and stuff, and like it takes those, and you're angel hunters, and you're these like spirits. So you're these spirits chasing these angel hunters, but you own like a taqueria or like a carniceria or something like that, like a bar or a butcher shop or whatever. So it's like taking like this Mexican like sort of like perspective, which as someone who is 4th, 5th Texican, like born and raised in Texas, who knows like how far that lineage goes. It's something I want to play. Also, Pasión de las Pasiones is like another one.
Is that like a telenovela one?
Yeah, it's a telenovela written by a Latino. So it's very.
It's going to be overwrought. Everyone's feeling things all the time.
Oh yes, it's very like on all the time. So it's very like telenovela, soap opera, sort of like mi amore, like ay Dios mío, like sort of like just very dramatic.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
All right. So you've been very generous with your time. I really appreciate it. We close every episode with the same question.
Okay.
It's the Space Jam question. Okay. Aliens have come to Earth. They're going to destroy the world unless you easy for me to say, unless you run them one fantastic 4-hour game. What's the system and what's the scenario?
Oh my God. Oh no. And I looked at this question and I was like, I have no idea. Oh gosh, I would say, There's so many good options. That's the problem. I'm looking at the spreadsheet again to help me out.
I mean,
Because
the question is, do you go to your kind of home and do Monster Hearts, which I feel like is a game you could kind of run a good version of in your sleep,
yeah,
or do you like go, Hail Mary, let's run this thing that I think could be fantastic?
yeah. I think if it's a right then, right there situation, I had no prep, I'd probably go Monster Heart just because I know it like the back of my hand. If I had like, hey, you have like an hour to run this, I would, or like have an idea to prep, I would probably go like Worldwide Wrestling.
I love worldwide. So
It's so fun.
like wrestling has not had a factor in my life since I was like 12, but
Yeah.
we played a game of worldwide wrestling and it was hilarious.
I think that's why I love it so much. It's just because it's just off the wall, like the sort of game that I'm like, this is just a fun game. Like it's not
So
like
the idea of worldwide wrestling, very quickly, is that you're all characters in a wrestling company, and the GM runs the company. And so the GM is going to tell you who's going to win in each match. And because I don't want to shock anyone here, but wrestling is predetermined.
what? How dare you say that?
Spoiler alert. And so the GM says, okay, you two are going to fight, and here's who's going to win that match. And then you can decide that you want to, what's the quote in the game? You can go into business for yourself, is how the game refers to it. And you can decide, I'm going to win this match because there are benefits to winning matches in the game. It's just endlessly hilarious, and the archetypes just make, like, even if you don't know wrestling, archetypes just make sense right away. It's
like the high flyer, like, okay, yeah, he does like a lot of the flips and stuff, or the mechanical one who does like all the like the maneuvers and the locks and whatnot. So like,
and I mean, the funny part is the matches themselves are like maybe a third of the game. Most of it is these ridiculous characters who are also regular people.
Yeah.
Trying to like live and have relationships and exist in this weird ecosystem where, you know, whenever anyone sees you, you have to be the like stuck up royal, you know, British snob.
Yeah.
Even though you're actually a guy from like North Carolina or something. You know, it's so much fun. I think that's a great choice. That would be a game that I would want to.
Like, if it's in the world, let's just do worldwide wrestling, because like, why not? Because it's just fun.
That is a game that I think you could literally just pick up and run at the table. You know, that's just a game that kind of, you know, I'm a GM. I love GMs. I don't want to demean GMs, but that game kind of runs itself. Mm-hmm. You know, your biggest choice as a GM is like seeing who's going to get maddest if you make them keep losing matches. You know, that's,
or like setting them up for like, you know, them running into an audience member or like anything like that. But like, so basically you're just playing, like, they're such big personalities as characters that you just have to just fill in the gaps, and that's about it. Like,
I think that's a great point, is that they're already ridiculous characters, and so you can fold stuff. I mean, and it's one of those games that like creates stories that people talk about. Like, you know, I see guys who were in that game we played, and we're still like, oh, remember that time when, you know,
you're like, oh, buddy.
Yeah, it's really funny. It's really good. Morgan, thank you so much.
Thank you. I had a blast
to talk Powered by the Apocalypse games. I hope that Morgan has given you a sense for how versatile these games are, and how there's a Powered by the Apocalypse game out there that will fit whatever story you want to tell.
Come to me. I will help you.
Yeah, that's right. Find Morgan on Twitter. Maybe she'll share that spreadsheet. I don't know. Maybe
maybe you'll just give me some ideas of what you want. I'll just throw games at you.
Like, you're the Apocalypse sommelier. That's your. If that's not a Twitter handle, it should be. That would be. But yeah, I think that for me, it's a great game for GMs to cut their teeth in. It's a great experience as a GM to get you a little bit. It's a comfortable medium into story games and narrative games that doesn't totally just throw you in the deep end and say swim. You know, there's enough mechanics there and kind of tools that you can frame the world so that you can start to get used to having your players giving you that input and helping world build with you. I think it's great. And so you can see on the screen where to find Morgan. Tell us about your podcast briefly.
Yeah, so if you want to, hear some Powered by Apocalypse games, you're more than welcome to join our podcast. It's a Powered by the Players. It's a actual play podcast for all your favorite PBTA games with a rotating diverse cast that are mini campaigns and one shots. You can find us on Twitter on PBT Players. So that's PBT Players. Yeah. Yes,
And
Twitter handle. Yeah.
get it wherever you get your podcasts.
Spotify, iTunes, wherever.
It is a good listen. I have found it's actually great for like I'm between podcasts or something. I'll just download an episode or two and listen. I'm a big fan. I think it's great. Thank you so much, Morgan. And thank you for helping me keep the game moving. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Folks, I appreciate each of you who watched this. Thank you so much for your likes, your subscribes. Leave some comments. Tell me about your Powered by the Apocalypse games. Don't tell me about your sex moves, please. I beg you. Well, YouTube's going to love that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to call this episode Sex Moves.
We did talk about them a lot, so
It's very different. I mean, I think to me, it's an interesting conversation because that there's so much at the core of the game, but it's a thing.
I mean, you have people who kill and maul and torture like in your old school games. Romance and sex are just something that never get touched because they're taboo. But like, why are they taboo? Like,
our American, sensibility of blow off heads all you want, but a breast, whoa,
intimacy. You're not gonna have intimacy here. That's off the table.
Yep. Let's go back to fighting.
Yeah.
All right, we've ended this thing like 3 times now. Clearly, we have a lot. We still have things to talk about. I would love to have you back in a year or so to look at where the Powered by the Apocalypse world is going.
Yeah.
What's PBTA 2.0?
Yeah, like right now I can tell you that there's Urban Shadows just did a second release. Monster Hearts, I think a couple years ago, did the second release because they're updating. Dungeon World hasn't, but who knows if they'll keep writing because of
things.
Because
of sex moves.
No, Dungeon World is not because of sex moves. It's because of one of the co-writers did a bad.
Well, yeah, that was the sex move.
Oh yeah, that's true. But I see various iterations of PBTA games now. They'll have play sheets, but they won't use the 2d6. There's a game I'm actually playing right now every other Friday called A Tale of Twinkle and All, which is a Chimera RPG. So it takes various genres like fantasy, magical girl, superheroes, and you have 2 different playbooks and from all those genres, and you put them together, and that's your character.
Weird.
And you don't use 2d6, but you still have the same algorithms of the 2d6 system. So you have d12s, d8s, d4s. But It goes with the same algorithm, but it's still technically a PBTA game because you have playbooks. You have 2 dice that you're rolling, and you have the same 6 under is bad, 7 and 9 is good, 10 plus is.
So sometimes you're just really good at something.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, huh?
Yeah, I'll send you that information too. But
this is, I mean, I would love to do the state of the apocalypse, in a year, that sort of thing. So again, Morgan Nuncio, find her on Twitter at Serena Bezos, easy for me to say. Look for her podcast and follow her to the apocalypse. I guess there's nothing left to say, but goodbye, internet friends.
Bye.